So let's talk about Sword Art Online.
Okay, let's not even begin to pretend you guys don't know what this horsecock in tiny mouth, better known as Sword Art Online, is. SAO, as it's referred to as by people in the know, whether they want to be or not, is a Japanese light novel series written by Reki Kawahara, a person who knows nothing about how games work, nothing about how game development work, nothing about how game distribution and cost work, nothing about how actual story progression work, and absolutely nothing about how sex works.
I could feel my hot sperm gushing deep into Asuna as she trembled in yet another climax. 2 years worth of semen made a gulping noise as it flowed endlessly into Asuna.
So yes, Reki is basically one of those man-children who once went, "Hey, wouldn't it be cool if I was the dopest motherfucker in a video game and I fucked all the bitches and could make them come?" When it is clear he knows nothing of neither video games nor sex. Ever since I first sat down to watch Sword Art Online, I hated it. Or well, that's not entirely true. The first maybe 2 episodes had me somewhat interested, but then I started to see what SAO was, and it's really just an excuse to tell a fantasy story where you can every now and then fall back on it being a video game to either spice the story up a little or to circumvent plot things. And it's not the first anime to do so, but it's probably the most prolific one. And I've always had kind of a disdain for these stories that took place of a game, cause I always understood that the big cinematic battles you'd see would just be exaggerated fights the players would have, when in reality this is what's going on screen. They never address why it's even possible for someone to be so much stronger than anyone other than they're just good at the game. In SAO, Kirito's reason for being so much stronger is because he's a better player, so he has somewhat of a head start, and he's good at kendo, I guess. But how the fuck does that help when the combat is still determined by numbers? It doesn't. It's just a half-assed excuse why someone is better than others. The Chinese story, The King's Avatar, actually takes steps in fixing this by having the human element make sense in terms of gameplay, and what sets him apart from everyone else is that he's basically just having a knack for number crunching and high APM.
Trust me, I'm making a point here. We'll get into the webcomic soon.
Randomiz's We Live in an MMO is also about a story taking place in a video game, but this story on the other hand works. Why is that? It's because it uses the fact that it's a game to its advantage. Rando, for example, is dumb as a rock but super powerful, because he has put all of his stats in strength and not in intelligence, just like I would. Immediately you have an explanation for why he might be stronger than so many others. It's a world established by the fact that it's a game, but no one is really playing it. Everyone in the world knows it's a game but aren't players, they're the avatars. Thus the human element and their involvement is cut out, and you can tell a better story as a result, using people's already established knowledge about your typical RPG to tell a story. I hear it's a lot the same premise that the anime Overlord plays on, but I haven't watched it, so I can't confirm that.
So if you got We Live in an MMO, which does this fantastically here, and you got SAO, which is the literal worst over here, where will you find Wintermoon?
So one day I'm sitting there, not browsing porn, and out of nowhere I get contacted by some dude on Twitter who's talking Danish to me. A nice gentleman who found me through Nightmine. Thanks Nick, I love you! The gentleman was R. Merriweather, who wanted me to read and review his comic that he made together with the artist Mayuri, called Wintermoon, a webtoon that is sporting an average rating of 9.36 on Webtoons, and each page averages between 35,000 to 45,000 likes, and has over a whopping 140 episodes.
So a real powerhouse of webcomic, but where does that stack up compared to other MMO stories out there? Let's find out.
I must admit, when I first read this comic, I wasn't immediately impressed with how it started. It was very reminiscent of how many amateur webcomics go from a wacky, goofy gag strip comic to slowly creep into making it more serious. I can't tell if this is intentional, but at first I was a little put off by this. But in hindsight, it does actually manage to introduce the main characters in a very superficial way, so you can get an idea of what to expect from them that it can then add upon later on. The story is basically that the mage Florence, the priestess Risa, and the knight Gideon wants to make a guild, and at first it seems like they just want to do that for the sake of doing it so the story has somewhere to go, but as we will address later, there becomes a pretty interesting reason for this.
Honestly, the comic, unlike a lot of other comics that I've read, actually feels really backloaded. The beginning of the comic feels incredibly half-assed and superficial, but as you get into it, that's where the weight really starts to hit you.
Let's just jump straight into it, just so we can tie my long tirade earlier together with this and so I don't have to beat around the bush. At one point, when Risa's brother is introduced, something happens that made the comic go from meh to wait, hold the phone, which is it introduced the human element in a way I hadn't seen before. Because all of a sudden we see the person playing Risa, and later we see the people playing Florence and Gideon as well, and we see them interact and we see some of the issues they deal with in their daily life. This is a pivotal moment for the comic, I find, cause it took a comic that was dancing very close to having the same issue that SAO has, which was just being another excuse for making a half-assed fantasy story and then half-assedly throw some video game stuff in there to make it more exciting. Introducing this human element and showing how the characters actually use the game to deal with their real life issues is an incredibly interesting spin on things, and takes what can be a mental battle and gives it a physical form to actually combat in. This is also when the guild creation suddenly becomes so much more interesting, cause these are people who quote unquote lost their place to belong in the real world, and so now they are going into this digital world to make a home they can call their own and belong. It's escapism, clean and simple.
If you ask me, random nobody on the internet, this is the thing that sets this comic apart from other fantasy and video game stories out there. And it's something that I beg that they dive more into. Why? Well,
the writing is solid, let me get that out of the way, but it's not what I'd call great. It has a lot of interesting ideas and concepts, but it doesn't really focus on anything. It feels like a story that's all over the place. A story where the writer every now and then would have a cool idea but never stopped up to think, does this fit in this story? Actually, after talk with Mary, he admitted that, well, this was indeed the case. Cause first you got them making a guild and Risa meeting her brother, and we see the issues she has with him, and then how they're gonna fight him and his guild in a tournament to put the brother in his place. All of this makes sense and all of the elements help to reinforce one another. This right here is a great story about finding a place to belong through whatever means that are at their disposal, and shows some of the great values video games can have for people who feel cast aside by the real world. A+. And then shit happens. Suddenly they introduce artifacts through what are clearly unabashed references to Tweedledum and Tweedledee from Alice in Wonderland. To those younger people out there, they are the same kind of character you'll find in the Lutece twins in BioShock.
I find that as satisfying as I'd imagined.
Chin up, there's always next time.
I suppose there is.
Artifacts are things that the game's creator has left in the game to give certain people an unfair edge, as a sort of statement that not all men are born equally. The only one we've actually seen in action at this point in time is the power that the druid Amocin unknowingly shows he has by being able to lag. You heard that right. Now honestly, I found this to be a funny thing, if not greatly exaggerated, cause I think any online service that sees you lag in place for more than 30 seconds will just straight up kick you and make whoever is playing the game just drop it like a bad habit. I mean, I can't even deal with 7 frames of lag when I play fighting games. But yeah, it's a fun thing, and if Amocin then decided to use this lag as an unfair advantage, that would be a funny, different way of using your flaw as a strength. The problem is that it's then shown that this is one of those unfair advantages that the developers have put in the game, even though Amocin himself earlier states that this is his entire internet being wonky and not just the game, but I digress. I kinda feel it detracts from the strength that could have been, but even more so, what does this add to the story that was being told up to now? Like, what does this have to do with the theme of escapism? And just as you're dealing with this, suddenly there's the mysterious expansion that's coming out. Again, it's a great idea, as I think a lot of us has tried being in an MMO just before a big expansion. There's this kind of energy that you won't find anywhere else, and I feel this comic catches this energy really well. But again, if the original story we've been told is over here, and the artifacts are over here, the patch is somewhere over here. They don't feel connected at all. Just a mishmash of things all happening at once, and then there seems to be a faction war on the horizon as well. Again, cool concept, but what's it doing here? It should be stated there's a high chance this will all come together in some way or another to become one story, but right now it just feels like a mixture of cool ideas that don't necessarily blend well together.
It's a good thing to have a bunch of cool elements in your story, don't get me wrong, but if it doesn't help with reinforcing your story and telling what you're trying to tell with it, maybe it's for the best if you then just take it and put it on the shelf and return to it later for a different project.
I feel this is an important thing to talk about, cause a lot of people start their stories when they're young, and so they get inspired runningly as they're making their stories by things around them that they witness, play, hear, or just come up with. And then they see that they have this outlet for their imagination and they just throw it in there cause they might as well. This can be a good thing, but I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say it often isn't. Like, let me ask you guys, how often have you seen some work that starts out as one thing and then stays like that for a long time, and then eventually it derails into something completely different? Like, I remember a long time ago I was reading this webcomic called Apple Geeks, which was just your run-of-the-mill nerd comic about people having hijinks around Apple computers and how good they were. But then the protagonist as a joke creates this robot chick made out of Apple components, and the comic completely derailed into being an action drama comic with no jokes anymore. We also saw this with Concession and how all of a sudden the goofy dark powers suddenly became serious. Megatokyo that suddenly started taking all of its over-the-top exaggerated jokes as serious elements. Even the silly dumb Control-Alt-Delete comic went from having nerdy dick jokes to end with Ethan giving his life to save the future or some shit. I mentioned it in passing in an earlier video, but this is something known as cerebral syndrome.
It's not necessarily a bad idea to start your comic out with a gag strip comic formula, because it's such a nice and easy way for people to set their expectations of what they can expect from the characters and understanding the universe and the plot and so on and so forth. But the problem arises when the tonal shift is over 100 pages in. Then it just feels like it's something you just came up with on the fly and you kind of got inspired by something that's like, oh, now I need to change it.
I've given Final Fantasy VII a lot of shit before, but if there's one thing this game does better than almost any other that I can think of, is that it's keeping its core themes centered and focused around almost everything it does. No matter where you are in the game, no matter what threat you're facing, you can almost always return to the theme of life of the earth. You see it everywhere. Ares flowers, the materia, weapon, Genova, even Ares' death scene has a ton of symbolism associated with the life of the earth and how we as humans are destroying it. If you do decide you wanna put in various elements or side plots into your story, it needs to do something for the main theme. It can be put it into a different perspective, present that theme in a different way, juxtapose it, work as an allegory for the theme and stuff like that. When I look at Winter Moon, I don't get that at all when looking at the expansion pack or the artifacts. All I'm seeing is someone going, yo, this would be cool, and then they ham-fisted it in there.
Like, I love Silent Hill, I really do. I also like stupid jokes and dank memes, but do you honestly think that this would work?
But you're wrong.
I also have a slight issue with the way the real world issues are portrayed in this comic. If it's an MMO, you can showcase stuff as exaggerated and over the top as you want, as it's not real. It's a video game. Like, this is the medium where you can fight a luchador gorilla and suplex him. Gorilla suplex! But the moment you're dealing with the people behind the monitor screen, I personally think a certain amount of care and tact should be given to it. Especially when it comes to psychological abuse. Risa's brother is like an arm's length away from beating the shit out of Risa, so much so that she's so scared of him that she threatens him to shoot him in self-defense if he enters her room. At this point in time, this is fine, this is great, but when you see his justification for this, the dude might as well be a supervillain. Like, he's like this because his family put the entire burden of the family on him, so he was forced to study and be an adult while Risa was free to putz around and do whatever. And when the brother Diedrich sees Risa online in the same game he can play only for 2 hours a day, he starts hating her for hogging all the attention instead of playing together with her, which was a thing he adored to do in the past. There's an escalation that's too drastic and extreme compared to the context it's given. It feels silly. Florence is better, but still has the same issue to a certain extent.
Now, this can take place in a different country where this sort of escalation makes more sense, but I kind of think this sort of confusion could have been avoided if this was given more screen time, and especially more so considering this is what the entire story centers around.
With all this negative stuff being said, I don't want you to think I didn't enjoy reading Wintermoon. It's still a really good story and one that deals with it being in an MMO in an interesting and new way every now and again. One thing you gotta give this comic is its pacing, where you'll sit down reading the comic and when you stop you just flown past a bunch of stuff, but at no point does it feel like you missed anything. It keeps a brisk and great pace while still allowing itself to slow down when something needs to be elaborated upon and gone more into depth with. The humor is solid and got a bunch of good audible chuckles out of me, especially when you see the people who easily fall for Risa's manipulation, as this is something I've seen happen when playing World of Warcraft constantly, and it's just as pathetic and funny there as it is here.
There's a girl on Xbox Live! Hey baby, you want a real man who's good at MLG? What the? Hey, back off, shit pounder! I saw her first!
Oh, I'm sensitive, meaning I own her!
That's it, you want an ass kicking? I will fucking lag!
It's also one of those comics that feels like it more or less just set the stage and now freaking everything can happen. It's one of those comics where once the characters are introduced, they more or less just live their own life and you get to follow them and their hijinks and just watch how everything they do fits with their personality.
Like, I honestly don't think there's a better feeling for you as a writer than just to one day wake up and it's like, yeah. I wonder what Florence has done today. Fuck, you burned down a capital.
Ultimately, the writing is okay, but it does have some flaws as of writing this review. It might all be fixed along the way cause the ball is still in the air, but it does kinda make you wonder if it's actually planned or it's just a mishmash of good ideas thrown together in the now. In terms of where this stacks up to its competition in terms of being a story taking place in an MMO, I will however say it's somewhat on the weaker side. Much like SAO for the most part, it just feels like a fantasy story that happens to be in an MMO to give it some spice, rather than making the entire story around it. The expansion could just as well be ships finding a new land. The artifacts could just as well be, well, magical artifacts. And you could easily just delete the damage numbers or health bar, cause the numbers don't mean anything, cause we don't know how much they're detracting from the total's health pool, and the health bar is just a smudge of color that I've tried and failed to find any head or tails in. The only thing that really couldn't be replaced by some fantasy stuff is the one thing that sets the comic apart, which is the human element, and how the different characters uses the game as a coping mechanism. That being said, I don't want you to think this is as bad as SAO. I would never say that about this comic. Cause I did enjoy this, and SAO made me, I don't know, want to chug acid with my asshole. I just really hope that the real life stuff starts playing a more active role than the fantasy stuff, and the game gets treated more like a game rather than an excuse for a fantasy setting.
Now, I understand that not everyone wants a serious story. Not everyone is like me, and thank fuck for that. Some people just want a wacky, funny story with a gay mage doing wacky antics with his group. Then that's fine. I just feel that this is a gold mine that would be a shame not to dive further into.
The first thing that hits you, or at the very least should, is how great the art is. Everything is super colorful and the designs are on point. The visual style of the comic is very reminiscent of a manga or manhwa, so much so that almost all of the men seem to fall into the bishi category, where they might as well be girls with their pointy chins and feminine eyes. It is in fact so much in that category that it uses the one guy who actually looks like he has an ounce of testosterone in his body as a joke, and makes him a huge hulking beefcake with a majestic beard and equally as majestic speedo.
This is my favorite character, cause I'm a massive fan.
Wintermoon sports some great art with its anatomy and line art, and especially with its presentation in the frames. You always know where you are in a scene and what a scene is supposed to convey, and its use of color really helps either setting the tone of a scene but also enforce a joke or a statement. Mayuri shows a great understanding of the typical JRPG armor tropes, and you are immediately believing that yep, this is indeed an MMO. A great job is done establishing the universe and setting every time we're in a new location by showing the background in a very charming and unique, almost watercolorly style. And it fits with the universe, so even if it looks a little sloppy, it somehow fits. It at no point feels lazy, like using a picture found on Google or an asset from an art program, even if the background is somehow reduced to a smudged color. Mayuri knows when to put the background in focus and when they don't have to, and it really makes it important in a story where several stories takes place in different locations, sometimes at the same time.
It's fine to be lazy, you just have to be lazy in the right way.
Okay, I need to talk about this, and I got no evidence of this being the case or not, but I still need to address this. As good as the art is, and as good as the backgrounds are, it often feels like they were made separate of one another. Like, look at this picture for example. There's this odd outline around the characters, almost as if they were being crudely thrown into a scene with Photoshop. Kinda makes them stand out as not being part of the environment, like they are a sticker or something. Look at this scene here. Here the outline isn't here, and so it feels like everything fits. I know it's not due to sunlight, cause sometimes it would be in places the sun wouldn't hit. It however always fits with being around the character's silhouette. Like, look at this. Look how oddly this guy looking compared to Florence, who doesn't have this white outline. Who feels more like they belong in the scene, and who feels more like they were just photoshopped in? I don't think I'd mind as much if the graphical designer part of me wasn't close to shitting his entire ass in anger when I saw stuff like this. When photoshopping and cropping something in, you can sometimes see the line between where the original begins and when the other ends. Sometimes that is shown by one of these lines here. And for the record, these aren't even the worst offenders, and these are found all the way throughout the comic. you'll see this odd outline hovering slightly outside the silhouette like a bubble. Sometimes, like here, it'll even hover oddly far outside of the silhouette, and it's not like it adds anything. To prove that, I've taken the liberty of erasing the line so we can compare. See how much more the character feels like she's part of the scene rather than just weirdly placed in it? Now this can just be how Mayuri chooses to do their line art, and that's... well, it's not something I like, but you do you. But the reason why I'm thinking Photoshop is because then I see shit like this. And boy fucking howdy, there are mistakes that only beginners would really do. So I'm just gonna straight up tell you how this picture was made. Mayuri did the outline, probably using a pretty thick brush, then used a magic wand tool or something similar to select the area within the line art, and then made a white to grey gradient. How do I know that? Because of this bullshit right here. You see this line? This means that between each side of this line, there's a selection of pixels that were not chosen to be included when doing the gradient, and so it was just left black. This could be fixed with, say, a smudge tool or a patching tool, or could be completely circumvented by making a gradient on a layer underneath the line art and expand the selection so it reaches over the line art and then done the gradient.
This just tells me that this was either rushed or it was done with someone who wasn't very fluent with using the tools in the program that we're using. I mean, these are the same kind of mistakes we saw in Faithful Hearts. Think about that.
Now, I made a big deal out of this, and frankly this is probably not something you as an audience will notice or even care about, but this is something that I've been taught to keep an eye out on. So when I see it, obviously it makes my mind start racing. It's not super bad, it's just a design choice I question. It's not that it's necessarily wrong, but if I was to use the white outline, I'd probably use it to make the character pop out more, if there were a lot of characters on screen at once. It could also be, I don't know, a magical shield that the characters wield, but we know that isn't the case as we see the characters in real life having the lines as well. If nothing else, it makes it super easy to crop the characters out of a frame and make a picture or a body pillow out of it.
You can thank me later. Just remember to ask for permission first.
To get back on topic, I really like the designs of this comic. It feels like every design has been made with the different characters' personalities in mind. Florence's outfit is colorful and flamboyant, much like he is. Risa is sexy, revealing, and reminiscent of a schoolgirl uniform fitting her young and seductive nature. Gideon is rather plain and clean cut, fitting his rather aloof and quote-unquote boring personality. Amocin is wearing a big fluffy robe, one that appears to be too big for him, really emphasizing his cuteness and small size. And lastly we got Bob, having no clothes that defines him, but instead has a strong focus on his muscles, as that's what he's known for and little else. These are designs that are super strong and simple and easily recognizable.
It says a lot when you can make such a solid and easily recognizable design in a setting that is so infamously known for its over-the-top and flamboyant designs, and still make it seem like the designs are fitting in universe.
There are, however, certain two things about the art that leaves a lot to be desired. The first one is the portrayal of action. Luckily, a lot of the action is downplayed to just a massive explosion, which all look great, but the moment the opponent isn't reduced to ash after a single explosion, things gets a little dicey. Stuff such as punching people becomes a little worrying, cause it seems like everyone's constantly punching at an awkward angle that snaps the person's wrist if it connected, and some magic fights are reduced to just color smears with black silhouettes in between. At one point a guy gets impaled by a sword and blown up, and you have to goddamn squint to see that he is flying away in that explosion, Team Rocket style. And I'm not gonna spoil anything, but where this guy's body lands would have made an important punctuation of the battle and set up what happens next. But we just don't see it. In other words, we often see a lot of the cause but little of the effect. Which works if it's just one of those goofy lol I'ma blow you up moments, cause that works great for humor. But for serious poignant moments, the effect adds a lot of weight and credence to a scene that is sorely missing sometimes. The second thing is more of a thing I hope to see, cause Mayuri is, despite my complaints, a really good artist. but I can't help but feel she sometimes plays it a little safe. The thing I hope to see is her using the panels more to her advantage. We saw in Killing Stalking just how great usage the webtoon vertical formula can be used with clever usage of panels and gather, and with how good Mayui is as an artist, I was kinda shocked to see that absolutely nothing was done with the panels here. It's not something I'm gonna actively berate Mayui for, but it's something I hope she dares to play around with more in the future. Most of all, cause it can do so much for the storytelling of the comic.
I wouldn't bring this up if I didn't believe that Mayui was ready to take this next step. I got all the faith in her.
Okay, listen, we get it, okay? We really do get it. Florence is gay. It's not like this information is hidden in any way, as you are reminded in damn near every goddamn page he's on. It actually becomes rather boring and tedious that so many punchline is, "Hey, Florence is gay! What's this? A hot girl is gonna mag on him? Whoops! Fut be gone! Florence is gay! Ha!" So much of the comic is spent with this being one of the only character traits Florence has, that and him having a better than you mentality, which I honestly found more endearing than his constant mistreatment of women just so he could check out guys. And before you flip out, no, it's not because he mistreats women I'm not okay with it, it's because, again, it's the same shit over and over again. It gets repetitive and boring and honestly makes it feel like you're being talked down to. Be that as it may, Florence really gets time to shine once we see him in real life and see the things he struggles with. It's still pretty heavy-handed and extreme to an unbelievable extreme, but it makes him hiding his sexuality in real life and how he flaunts it in the game a lot more interesting to see. It becomes pretty evident that Florence isn't necessarily super good at the game. He's just super strong, which actually makes it pretty fun to witness.
Despite the constant repetition of, "Hey, Florence is gay!" I really like Florence. He is really well written, as shown by the fact that he can be so likable, yet still so faulty.
This trait is also shared with the comic's other main character, Risa, in that she is incredibly annoying and faulty, but somehow, don't know how, still likable. She even checks the box for me personally, being a type of character I don't like, which is the bratty little sister. But I know some people are into that shit, and you do you. Risa is a character who loves to use her sex appeal to manipulate people into doing her bidding, and I'm just gonna completely disregard the justification we got for that in the finale, cause I feel that adds way too much depth to an otherwise simple, silly and charming character trait. Risa, much like Florence, has quite the potty mouth on her, which, coming from me, I know, and would in a different comic be a perfect villain. Risa is a young girl who tries to act tougher and more mature than she really is, and it's really impressive to see how constantly, every time shit comes falling down on her, she discards the charades and we see the fragile little girl who is in need of help. It's pretty well done by Mary to remember that this part of her isn't necessarily who she truly is, but who she wants to be, and when people are stressed, they tend to forget to act like that.
I think what I like about these characters is that they're not super deep, but what is there works really well.
With every wacky and silly character, there of course needs to be the serious character that can juxtapose the silliness and be the one to point out how wacky Risa and Florence are. This character is Gideon, and you'll have to excuse me, but besides that, I'm not getting much else from him. That's both a good and a bad thing. Cause he's supposed to be kind of a blank, uninteresting slate, so he kind of fills that role to a T. But at the same time, boring, even if by design, is still boring. I do like how he seems to also be well-mannered, but frankly he's just pretty uninteresting and seems only to be there to juxtapose Risa and Florence.
Like, if you ever felt like this awkward third wheel in a group, just say to yourself, well, at least I'm not Gideon.
Ian, I can't help but feel is a girl favorite. Cause he's just super adorable and everything he does just screams Moe. It's kind of endearing to see the guy who has some super magnificent power to lag out of existence be this awkward, bumbling, insecure little kid. I love stuff like this. It's like in JoJo how they give one of the strongest stands in the series to Okuyasu, but he's too stupid to use it properly. Eason also has a massive crush on Risa, which is kinda cute to see, again because of the juxtaposition between Eason's cute and innocent persona and then the typical Risa persona we see, which is borderline supervillain.
Again, there's not a whole lot to say, but what is there works.
Lastly, of the protagonist goofs, we got Bob, and just like stated earlier, he's probably my favorite character in the entire comic.
Cause I'm a massive fan.
Bob is actually pretty similar to Eason in terms of personality, which is a hilarious contrast when you got the cute little innocent bishy boy being all shy and awkward, and then you got Beefcake McGee over here in a Speedo being just as awkward and shy. I think one of the things I like the most about Bob is that he, much like me when it comes to playing RPGs, is a goddamn idiot. This is really something I hope they keep expanding upon in the second season, cause it's something I can identify with so well. Bob simply doesn't understand any and all of the more complicated aspects of an RPG and still manages to get out on the other end relatively unscathed. The comic doesn't address whether he's just super lucky or his stats are put in a super broken way, or he's just naturally really good at the game. And just like how I don't want a quote-unquote real reason for Saitama's strength in One Punch Man, I don't want a real explanation for why Bob has managed to get as far as he has. I love how he's a character where the author and artist has just embraced the stupid, rolled with it, and not given it too much agency, and it shows.
Part of me wants Bob to be played by like the least expected person in the world, like a little schoolgirl or a milfy office lady. Like just take this and just run completely amok with the silliness.
Honestly, it's kinda weird cause most of the time the characters are either on par with the all-around writing or worse, cause it's something not a lot of people really work that much on. But here the characters I feel are better written than the all-around story. Again, they're not super deep, but they don't have to be. They're all, maybe with Gideon as an exception, doing a great job in making the story entertaining to follow, and frankly, if it hadn't been for these great characters, I don't think I'd have enjoyed the comic as much as I have. Obviously, there's some characters that are stronger than others, some that are worse than others, and some that exist. But for a story so centered around the characters, their feelings, and what they do and what they're up to, the fact that the characters are as good as they are is really good and a great important strength to have. The focus in this regard really feels like it's been put in the correct place, and I respect that.
That being said, whoever didn't see it coming that Lilith was going to do that heel turn is legally retarded. I'm talking you could probably get health benefits retarded here. I'm not even saying this as a spoiler warning or anything, because it shouldn't even be a spoiler because it's so fucking obvious.
The writing is a 7. I like Winter Moon. I feel it has a lot of good stuff going for it. I do however feel it's a shame stuff was implemented in this comic just cause Mary thought it was cool. But I also have faith it's something he can fix and make work given enough time. The art is a 7 as well. The art is great, really visually pretty, and the designs are on point. But there's unfortunately a lot of shortcomings that really doesn't feel like they should have been there. The characters are an 8. Like I said before, I honestly think this is the first time I've liked the characters more than the actual story. Where the story feels a little mishmash all over the place, the characters feel laser targeted and on point. They're a little simple, but again, it's no real issue. All in all, my reading experience with Winter Moon is a 7. It's a good comic that I definitely think you guys should check out, flaws and all. I'm glad Mary reached out to me and asked if I could give a look, cause even if it may sound like I didn't enjoy the comic, it was still an interesting read.
Winter Moon is a really interesting spin on the whole living in an MMO type of story. And with season 2 on the horizon, I can definitely see some really interesting and cool concepts showing up in the next season, and I can't wait to see it. Let me hear what you guys think in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys in the next webcomic relief. Take care.
is Risa. Starting today, I'll create a new segment here on YouTube where I will review webcomics. There are good comics, there are bad comics, and then there's horror comics. And I want to review them all. And I want to review the comics that you suggest. So, starting today, I will review a webcomic called Bizarre Uprising. So you can sort of get an idea of what this new program is going to be. It's one of the comics that I read when I was a little kid. And
every move you make, every vow you break, every smile you fake, every claim you stake, I'll be watching you. Every breath you take, every move you make, every bond you break, every step you take, I'll be watching you. Every bond you break, every step you take, I'll be watching you.
yep, you saw that right. We are nearing the finale of this season of the webcomic relief. This was actually the penultimate episode of this season. So next one will be the big finale. There's a few things that I need to talk about in relation to that, and that is that I have a plan for how the ending is going to be. And for that ending to be as good as possible, I want to invite you guys to join in. And so I will be making a special board on the Webcomic Relief Discord that only people who decides to join will be able to participate in. And the way that you are allowed in, so to speak, is that you are willing to record stuff for this. Not just like as much as I want everyone and everything in there, I want this to be people who can record themselves. So no art, no voice bits or anything. It's only if you can perform in front of a camera, and you don't even have to perform properly. You just have to, perform properly. You don't have to perform like a master. I don't perform like a master. You just have to be able to do something in front of a camera. If you want to participate in the finale of the Webcomic Relief, just join the Discord and let me know, and I'll give you a special role so you can join this board, and yeah, we'll take it from there. So for this episode we have a lot of awesome sponsors, so let's just jump right into it. First of all, we have Nicholas Knudson. Nicholas wants me to push the YouTube channel called FishStickOnAStick. It's a channel that does roast reviews and readings of Creepypasta. So it's basically what you'd get if you mixed Nightmind with the Webcomic Relief. So check it out. Amocin. Amocin is working on a comic called Druids, which is a mature themed fantasy comic in the world of Warcraft. If you're interested in a more mature story from that world, go check it out. Hitori the artist. Hitori needs money for his dad's medical bills. If there's any way you can help Hitori, it would be greatly appreciated. You can both donate, pledge to his Patreon, or commission him and get some sick art for it. I'm a Moron. I'm a Moron wants me to push his comic Doom Ones, which is a really meta Chosen One story with a twist. The link for it will be in the description. Rojaru. Rojaru wants me to push his friend Zeevkesly, who is currently living in Japan, but is raising money to move to America. They sell enamel pins, stickers of their design, and has or will open commissions for tattoos or just normal commissions. The link is in the description. The Bonsai. Bonsai wants me to push his comic Kill the Sun, which is finally dropping the 27th of August. Bonsai has confided a bunch of stuff about this comic with me, and I feel this has the potential to be one of the great ones. So check it out once it drops. Shane Asher. Shane has moved pretty far in the Hardwood Original Character Tournament that he's using as a preview for his webcomic SOS Soldiers of Terraria. Please go check it out and cheer him on so our boy can go as far as possible. And I also just want to give a huge shout out to Henry Volt, Lariah-kun, Sebastian Vanborg, Jordan Burke, Neo, Alex J, Stacy Pitt, KH Vaffield, Kawai Lee, Shiv, and Drika of Adrian. And I also want to give a huge shout out to all the lovely people that you're seeing on screen right now. If you want to support the show, change my life and make so I can live off of YouTube and entertaining people forever, please go to my Patreon. Here you can donate anything you want every month and you get a ton of awesome rewards for it. Just go to www.patreon.com/Risa with 2 eyes. You can also go to TeePublic and get your hands on some of the new webcomic relief merch. The link is in the description. And in case you didn't know, every time that you buy a shirt that is being designed by one of the awesome people in the webcomic community, you're also giving some money to the creator of that t-shirt print. And there's also both shirts, bags, things for your phone, a bunch of stuff. So by all means go check it out and use this link, because that means that the creators gets more money. If you don't want to support the show financially, at least think about liking the video, subscribing to the channel, or sharing your favorite webcomic relief episode with your friends. I'll see you guys at the next webcomic relief. Take care, bye bye.